Ever wonder what it would be like to have the 1 in a million game in World of Tanks? Well, today's video is going to showcase the 1 in a million game playing in the SU-130PM, the tier 8 Soviet tank destroyer that is by all means very dominant within World of Tanks, at least at tier 8, and we're seeing it in a tier 9 game and outstandingly performing up to a ridiculous amount of damage in a tier 8, unseen to be honest with you in such a tank as the SU-130PM, and I am amazed at how much damage it does. So stay tuned, make sure that you watch the video all the way through, as it's super important to see how the top players will play in vehicles like this within World of Tanks, and we're going to give a little bit of an overview as to how you too can try and replicate this, as I will hopefully do as well within this game. So what we're seeing here is a really nice early lucky shot into the KV-3, picking up nearly 1,000 damage just from one shell, and then the second shell goes directly into him, finishing him off and picking up 1,400 damage straight away. So thumbs up, brilliant start to the game. Nothing spectacular in terms of positioning, a typical tank destroyer position in World of Tanks in this vehicle. Utilising the auto aim here to lock on to the centre of mass of the AMX on the enemy team, and therefore allowing him to get an easy shell potentially at him. The T-95 on the enemy team pushing up aggressively, with the heat rounds that this tank has going up to 320 pen, you can reliably deal damage to the T-95, and you're seeing that here up against the side of the T-95. But more importantly, what this replay actually shows is that it's not necessarily always about the tank. In fact, it's about utilising the tank, using your own ability to come away with having like an insane amount of damage. And a lot of people think, you know what, if I just buy, for example, a BZ-176, I can just dominate games. And yes, you will perform better in the tank, but you will not have a 10k damage game in a BZ-176 if you're a rubbish player. So, you know, the tank can only do so much for you, whereas in a game like this, when you have a tank like the SU-130PM that is super consistent, you can come away with just damage numbers that you would never expect from a tier 8, and that is down to both the tank and the player being utilised to almost 100%, and that is what makes these 1 in a million games where not only have you played exceptionally, not only is the tank exceptional, but not only is the enemy team like playing in a way such that you can farm them and you can deal the damage that you need to, but also that you get the right map as well, because Sand River is a very good map for things like this SU-130PM, using the stealth that you have and being able to carry in these sort of games to have results like you're going to witness. And of course that's what we're seeing here. Instantly, straight away in the game, 3,000 damage, and to be honest with you, the enemy team have pretty much only received 3,000 damage, so it's nice to see how much damage has been done so far. But the one thing that you need to be aware of is that the SU-130PM doesn't have infinite rounds, and if you keep missing, you're not going to be able to finish off everyone. But it doesn't matter in this replay, because that's not what it's about. We're going to see how the choice of rounds and the rounds that you're using and the positioning and the movement and everything is played to the utmost ability. So, Sand River. You're seeing the one particular example of what happens on Sand River. There's a few different things that can happen. Usually you can have the enemy team YOLO the kind of western side of the map where they can push down and then they end up in your base, or you can have the push on the northern flank into the kind of hill area or the mountainous area, which you can see which the enemy team are doing right now, or you can see like a YOLO rush through the middle. But the best position to be in a tank destroyer like this, which has good camo and also the gun that it has, is in this bush right here, sat behind it, avoiding any shells, using the camo and bush mechanics to avoid taking any unnecessary hits, because you remain hidden up until the point where maybe it's not possible to remain hidden anymore as the enemy team push, because there's only so many tanks you can remove within the game before you start having to actually go on one-on-one engagements with them, or maybe even one-on multiple engagements. But you can see here a nice blind fire going up into the T-32. We have no idea if it did actually hit, but we'll have to wait and see till later. Now, one tank that you don't want to see and don't want to let you hit you when you're in a basic paper tank that is the SU-130PM is the Type 4 Heavy. So if you can get rid of him as quickly as possible, that's going to be a massive benefit and avoids kind of the RNG aspect of if that hits you, you being taken out in the game. Now, not necessarily hidden fully behind the bush, but doesn't get spotted either way, and it's looking like the enemy team are pushing aggressively. But with no heat rounds left, since there were a lot fired at the beginning of this replay, you're going to have to start aiming at the weak points. Now, granted that the enemy team are trying to push towards the cap circle, since for some reason all of the team are in the cap circle, even though there's a ton of damage to be had, and that's going to go in the favour of the SU-130PM player here, who is going to be basically butchering the opponents trying to YOLO towards the cap circle. And you can see that first with the CC Mark II, which if that caught you out, if that tier 9 Italian tank destroyer finds you and locks you down in place, yeah, you can lose all of the 1,100 hit points that you have in the SU-130PM pretty quickly. But he doesn't do that, and he actually remains in this sort of position, constantly pulling back. And I know that there's like a ton of reasons why maybe you wouldn't want to camp in the base on Sand River, but in this scenario, although he may have stayed still, he's now pushing towards the CC on the enemy team, and it's time to actually leave this position, because of course, having done 7,400 damage so far, you'd probably be thinking, well, maybe I can make this into an utterly unbelievable game. And you can see here a lovely shell goes into the CC1 and finishes him off, making the damage total up to 7,800. If you were in a tier 10 tank, that would be an amazing result, let alone a tier 8 tank destroyer made of paper in a tier 9 game. So unbelievable so far. And of course, this is going to continue. This doesn't end here. And as you can see with the length of the video, I'm sure that you can understand it too. Now, if you've enjoyed this replay so far, of course, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to send in your own replay, or you feel like you have a replay worth sharing, then please feel free to leave a email in my email description down below, where you can send in your own replays if you want them featured on the channel. I highly implore you to do that if you think that you've got some worthy of being shown. But the key thing here is within this game in particular is not making any silly mistakes. And we can see here a nice shell into the CC, locking down the tracks and gathering some assistance damage, not only by tracking but also by assistance. But that's not it. 8,400 damage done, and it's starting to look like a complete rout from the enemy team. He's just dominating, ploughing round left, right and centre, getting into the right position to finish off the low health targets now, and the enemy team have just completely wavered, having had to YOLO at this point. But 9,000 damage done now, and it just seems like every minute you're gaining an extra 2,000 damage, and the replay has been going on for about 9 minutes at this point, or just slightly under, so it's not even gone on that long. And it's been like constant damage every single time he's reloaded. There's someone to shoot, and this is where not only the skill, the tank, but also the match goes super well. And you can see here the enemy last alive, the T-28, the tier 8 tank destroyer from the American line, is now pushing towards the 274A, and with a shell into the back of him, can he secure the damage? Yes, he can, and he finishes off the last remaining tank on the enemy team, making this one of the highest damage replays I've ever seen in a tier 8 tank. 9,375 damage. I'm actually amazed. This is unbelievable, and it is definitely a 1 in a million game. There is very few players that can say that they've even reached close to 10,000 damage in a tier 8 tank, let alone doing it in such a fashion like this. So what does this replay actually look like in terms of damage and statistics and medals? Well, of course, a mastery badge. There's absolutely no surprise about that. A bruiser, fire for effect, tanker, sniper, confederate, high caliber, top gun, making 139,000 silver, even though he picked up 375,000 silver within the game. 7,234 base experience when multiplied with the times 5, I expect. 2,143 base experience, 9,869 damage, nearly 10,000 in a tier 8 tank, 6 enemies taken out, and what a result. A fantastic one I loved it. Thank you very much for uploading it onto the What Replay site, Uven, and yes, a brilliant result either way.